Hey guys, welcome to another episode of El Jefe's Shop. This week we're going to work on the toy waste, we're going to get the engine in, and we're going to see if this tail shaft actually fits. Alright, so as some of you know, this used to have a LS 6 litre out of a VE Commodore. So now I'm going to a 5.7 out of a VT. Reasons, I'm not keeping this thing. I wanted to keep the 6 litre, so I bought a 5.7. Then I sold the 6 litre to a good mate of mine, and he's going to use it in his project. So the problem with that is the front drive stuff on a VT is 20mm longer or further forwards than VE. I did leave myself a little bit of room on the cross member in this thing, but I'm not sure how much. So hopefully I left myself enough room there and in the tail shaft that I can shimmy this back 5 or 10mm maybe and just get it to sit in there nicely. So this engine hasn't been back in, well, this engine hasn't been in at all actually, and then the trans has been fixed, so I stuffed that up. I didn't put the converter all the way in, we pulled it apart. I didn't break anything, but we did find a band that was broken, so that was fixed. The trans is ready to go back on. Dale's given me a mystery stall. He got it as part of an engine package, and it says 3000 RPM and 10 inch. And that's all we know. We don't know what brand it is, we don't know where it came from, we don't know what condition it is. So I'm going to chuck that in and hopefully get this thing in there, get the tail shaft lining up. I'm going to have to remake engine mounts because I've now clearanced the floor. Hopefully I can lift everything up a little bit. So there's a bit of tinkering and a bit of figuring, and hopefully I don't have to swap the whole front drive stuff to VE, because then I have to find all of those parts and make it happen. Alright, so let's just get into it. I need to take all the parts off, and I need to tilt this cab forwards, and then I need to get the engine ready, and then Dale's going to be here in about an hour, and we're going to try and put this thing in. Alright, so Dale's here. We've just put the flex plate on the engine, and then Dale's put the stall converter in the trans.
And the trans fluid on the ground.
And the trans fluid all over the floor. And then taking the wiring off, taking the plumbing off of this thing. I've got 4 bolts left to take this off, and then we're going to try and put the trans on, and hopefully get further than we did last time, eh? Well, than I did last time, sorry. So last time it went on and the bell housing didn't actually flush up to the engine, and I think I put the stall converter in wrong. So Dale was in charge of that this time, and regardless what happens, it's going to be fine because I'm not going to record it and say that we didn't do it fully. Alright, turns out Dale can put a stall converter on better than I can. Because he drives automatics. Manually automatics. Alright, so that's on. Let's tilt the cab forwards and try and get this thing into the chassis rails.
You've got a lot of faith in those 6 single bolts. Oh. Yep. We're going to the camera.
Huh?
We're going to the camera.
What's wrong with that?
The witness machine.
Alright, so Dale's just left and we were successful in getting the transmission and the engine in. So the tail shaft does fit, but it's actually probably a little bit short. I left probably 25mm shorter, so that's probably on me. But the rear flange doesn't actually go to the diff very well. There's like a bit of a recess that should have been a bit bigger. So I'm going to have to get a little spacer made, but if I do that, I can also make the tail shaft a little longer. So I get a 25mm spacer made, push the tail shaft further into the gearbox, and then we're good to go. So we've jacked up the engine as far as we can because the trans is about to hit the crossmember just there. Everything else has got a fair bit of clearance. And probably could go another 50mm or so, but I don't have the room there. You can see clearance, and then the main thing that we were worried about, clearance right there. So I'm pretty happy with the progress today. We've got the brakes on, got the engine in. The brakes was a previous episode, but the engine's now in. So I'm going to have to make some different engine mounts. So I've changed mounts and I've also pushed the engine up. So what I have to do is put this engine mount on the other side and that engine mount on this side. And then I can remake the plates that come off the chassis rail onto the actual engine mount itself. So that'll be a job for another day. But other than that, it's in and it doesn't need to come out again, ideally. And also because we pushed the engine up, the heater stuff now clears and the thermostat housing now clears. I may have issues with the headers, but that's another problem for later. So that's really good. I just need to make this engine mount, the front engine mounts, and bolt the back in and actually get it sitting on its own weight. And it's really close. There's still shifter linkage, trans, cooler, exhaust, coolant, intake, the rest of the wiring. Like there's still a fair bit to do, but a lot of the hard stuff is actually done. A lot of the thinking's done. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to leave it for tonight. I've been working flat out on this thing for a couple of days and I'm pretty burnt out. So I'm going to go inside and edit and have an early night. Hell yeah. Alright, it's a new day. Let's get this engine in and mounted. So these are the mounts I had originally. So these 4 holes go into the chassis rail. This one here picks up on the engine mount and then goes to the block itself. Now the problem with that is I don't like them to start with, but the engine mount on this is not on this side. The engine mount now sits flat, whereas before it sat on a bit of an angle, probably that way. So now that it sits flat, I need to remake the engine mounts so everything sits flat. So I'm going to cut up those mounts that I've already got, swap the 2 on the engine side to side, and then remake everything for the front. I've also lifted the engine up a bit and got it as close to the cross member at the trans as possible. So when I put it all on the engine mounts, it'll come down a little bit and we'll be sweet. So let's get onto it. Let's cut those ones up and swap these over, see how far we can get tonight. Alright, so I just went ahead and made the whole mount again. So copied the 4 bolts off the original mount and then just used this piece of pre-bent steel that I had laying around. This was from hoist packaging for someone else that I grabbed. So 1 hole in there, the engine rubber mount will sit on there, then the engine mount will sit out here going to the block, and then this bolts through the side of the chassis rail. So I've done one side and I've half prepped the other side, so I've got the holes drilled here for the other side, and I've got the other piece down there with the hole in it. So I'll bolt this side up, and then I will use the engine being fixed in place to make the other side, to make sure that they are the same. So not a whole lot to show, it's just a bit of cutting and welding and measuring and the usual. So let it cool down and throw it in. Alright, it's in. Got one there and one there. I'd like to put a bar between the two and go underneath the engine and just give it a bit more strength, but it should be pretty good, I think. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's all under its own weight. We also have room in front of the engine. Not much, but we have room. That's the main thing. And then the trans is clearance there as well. Not much, but enough. So it all fits, everything works. You can use the original trans cross member that I made. So it works pretty good. That's the engine mount just there. So that'll do for now. And later on I'll come back and maybe put a bar across and paint this up and make it look nice. Alright, that's the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you're enjoying the toy race. We'll see you next week.